All right. Well, yeah. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us. You're. I mean, to me, you and Vince and you and Gorilla were the voice of wrestling when I started watching. So it's an honor to talk to you.
Well, thanks. You're dating yourself because I've been gone for 25 years.
I know, but yeah. But yeah, I wanted to talk about your book first, and then maybe a little wrestling too afterwards. So Skyhorse Publishing, they released an updated version of American Conspiracies with 4 new chapters. What process do you go through to decide what gets in the book?
We go through a process of looking at what's developed, what's happened, what's got the most meat on the bone, what can we investigate, what's high profile, and basically rip it down to what are they lying to us about.
Yeah, and do you get
or in the case of this, if they put something under the cloak of national security, then you need to find out, is it really our national security, or is it really to cover up something they don't want the public to know about?
Right. And do you get pitched a lot of different conspiracies that you're not interested in, or?
Oh, I don't pitch anything. No one pitches me. I mean, I had the conspiracy theory show where we would do, we did 8 a season, so we did, I guess, a total of 24. But me personally, nobody pitches me on anything. It usually deals with something that government's done that I have an interest in as to why it was done that way, or I want answers as to whatever it was they told me. And so I try to stay away from aliens and that type of thing because I'll let the other people look into that. To me, our government has enough stuff, and humans on Earth do enough stuff without looking for extraterrestrial or anything like that. Right. On the TV show, we went there because that was entertainment. But for me personally, I have no interest in it.
Yeah. A common thread with a lot of the conspiracies in the book is big government and big money, and which ultimately leads to corruption. And I think most Americans agree that the money is corrupting our political system. What can be done to start changing that and getting money out of the political realm? Because it just keeps getting worse and worse.
Well, there's only one thing that can be done, and it's very easy to do. The answer is as simple as the nose on your face, but it will be as difficult as climbing Mount Everest, probably, and that's this. The only way to get our country back, in my opinion, is to stop electing Democrats and Republicans. I wrote the book, Democrats and Republicans, No More Gangs in Government. Our forefathers warned us that political parties would be the destruction of America if they got a hold, and they've more than got a hold, because I like to quote Ralph Nader, we live in a two-party dictatorship. And very much the two parties will tie it in this way to where your people will understand. When I taught at Harvard, I did a class called How Pro Wrestling Prepares You for Politics at Harvard. And it really does, because these two political parties are no different than pro wrestling. In front of the cameras and in front of the public, they're all adversaries, but behind the scenes, they're all working together selling a product.
Yeah. Do you think a chance was missed by Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, not running as a third-party candidate? Because it seemed like if anyone could get traction as a third-party candidate, it would be one of those guys.
Well, I like what they did. But see, the problem is this. If you run as a third-party candidate, you'll get no publicity. Mm-hmm. See, the same corporations that own the two political parties and contribute and own them, they also own mainstream media. Mm-hmm. Just like an example, I'll give you a great example right now. You know the last Democratic debate?
Yeah.
Okay, CNN and all the talking heads on TV declared Hillary far and away the winner, right? Mm-hmm. Don't need Joe Biden. Hillary's carrying the mantle. Hillary proved it tonight, right? That's what they all told us.
Yeah.
Yet on the Internet, it was the opposite. 81% of the Internet said Bernie Sanders won the debate.
Right.
Now, how could there be that type of difference? And now you look in. Here, I'll give you a little touch of how you look for the conspiracy now. Okay, now you start checking Hillary Clinton's campaign donations. And you will find out that now that they let corporations play in the game and donate money, okay, CNN is owned by Time Warner. Time Warner, I believe, is the seventh largest corporate contributor to Hillary's campaign.
Yeah.
So, gee, does it now seem that they didn't have an agenda to declare Hillary the winner? That all their people on TV declaring her the winner, aren't they all being paid by the same entity?
Right.
Including Hillary?
Yeah.
There you go. Now, do you think you're getting fair, accurate reporting in government when you learn things like that? Absolutely not. Follow the money. Loyalty many times goes to who's paying the bills.
Right. So as far as that goes, where should people go for news on things like this?
Well, people have to do like I do. I do watch mainstream media, but I watch it with great skepticism, knowing the corporate ownership of it and the agenda that is always pushed. The internet is a phenomenal place, but again, you got to remember, you got to make up your own mind and do your own checking. Just because something's put in print or put on the internet or put on TV or anything doesn't necessarily mean it's true.
Right.
Case in point, my case against Chris Kyle, American Sniper. Mm-hmm. Everyone believes that I'm taking money from the widow and the children. Complete lie. Completely. It's been me against an insurance company from day one. Kyle's family hasn't paid a cent. They won't pay a cent. And yet the perception is carried out there that I'm the villain,
right,
going after the wife and children, when in reality I'm the baby face taking on the big insurance conglomerate. Mm-hmm. See the difference?
Right.
See how it can play?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And by the way, being a villain in wrestling has really helped me get through that. No, it has, truthfully. I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to have people dislike you. And that's what's made it easier for me to deal with, I didn't do anything, and yet I'm being falsely accused and hated because of it.
Yeah, I'm sure it helps you have a much thicker skin. I did want to ask you, too, regarding the elections coming up 2016. You said that you'd be open to being a running mate for either Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, and they got a very similar appeal in the fact that they're not paid off, and they're not they're kind of speaking from their heart, but they obviously differ greatly in their beliefs. Which candidate do you think you line up more with?
It's hard to that's difficult to say, because Donald Trump actually has been a friend for 25 years now, and he actually came to one of my fundraisers in Minnesota when I ran for the Reform Party in the state of Minnesota. Donald was there. Mm-hmm. So Donald's not some dyed-in-the-wool Republican. He joined, him and Bernie both went into these because they knew it would be easier to get press to jump in and be a Republican, jump in and be a Democrat. I have similarities to both of them, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. Bernie, they're poo-pooing him, but yet everywhere he goes, there's 20,000 people there. That's the way it was in Minnesota. They poo-pooed me, but yet everywhere I'd go was sold out, people to the rafters. And I got news for you. If people show up to see you in person, you can pretty well bank they're voting for you.
Right.
They can see all they want on TV. But when they physically show up because you're there, you can pretty well take that to the bank, that those are all people that are going to vote for you. And both Trump and Bernie are drawing the largest crowds. They're getting a fair. Trump gets plenty of publicity. Bernie doesn't get quite as much. But I differ with both of them. I'm completely opposite with Donald Trump on immigration. Bernie, I like a lot of things Bernie's saying, because there are a lot of major things wrong with America today when you have the income disparity. Mm-hmm. Where the upper 1% of Americans literally have 90% of the wealth, or over half the wealth. I forget how it comes out, but it's utterly absurd that much wealth is being held by so few, while so many need help.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, it gets down to this. Here's what it gets down to. Walmart, take the Walton family, who now own Walmart. Okay, they make billions of dollars every year apiece, and yet their employees have to be government subsidized because they don't pay them enough.
Right, yeah.
Now, something's wrong with that picture. That's where government needs to step in and say, wait a minute. You know, you can't be making billions and then expect us, the taxpayers, to subsidize your very employees while you walk away with billions. You know, people often talk about a minimum wage. I'll go the other way and think, why don't we have a maximum wage?
Yeah.
I mean, somebody can't live off $100 million a year.
Right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
What the hell couldn't you buy?
Right.
What would you possibly need? $100 million a year. Then in 10 years you'd be worth $1 billion, just on salary. But you know, and yet, that's un-American. In America, you can make as much as you want. Well, yeah, that's true. But are they really making it, and on the backs of whom?
Yeah. Right. I did want to ask you about, you wrote about 9/11 in the first edition of your book, and now you got another chapter dedicated to it. I've always been really interested in conspiracy theories, and especially the ones with JFK and Martin Luther King were ones that, you know, I read up a lot on. 9/11's always kind of disturbed me just because I've always kind of dismissed like a lot of the truther stuff just because I just can't bring it to myself to believe our government could be involved in something like that.
Why not?
It's just makes me more at peace, I guess.
Oh, yeah, I understand. I just throw that out there. That's the big problem.
Yeah.
People are in a comfort zone, and they don't like their comfort zone disturbed.
Yeah.
And if you disturb their comfort zone, they get angry at you, even though they might be telling you the truth. We always say we want the truth, but I don't believe we really do.
Right.
I don't believe it, because if you notice, whistleblowers and truth tellers generally go to jail now, don't they?
Right.
And the crooks get away with it, don't they?
Yeah. No,
that's the fault. That's the fault of our society. Regardless if you like it or don't like it, as Dr. King said, the truth will set you free.
Right.
And that's why the quest for the truth always has to be sought, whether you like it or not. And the point on 9/11, the second chapter, it's all about the 20. You're familiar with the 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 report?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't until I read it. Until I read it in the book.
Okay. Well, they're there, and we can't see them. Now it's been 10 years, over 10. Why can't we read what we paid for? We paid for the 9/11 Commission and to investigate. 28 of the pages, George Bush decides we can't see. George Bush decides that. So he redacts them, and Barack Obama goes along with it.
Yeah.
Well, Congressman, there's a bill 428 right now in the Congress to ask them to release the pages. I wish people would get behind it so we can know what happened that day. I'm a big boy. I can take it. Well, Congressman Cook and Senator Bob Graham of Florida, both on the Intelligence Committee, both have read the report completely without redacted pages. Both independently have told me there's nothing in there dealing with national security. But what is in there changes 9/11 completely.
Yeah.
That's why they don't want us to see it. What's in there is the hijackers had a direct financial trail back to Saudi Arabia. In other words, they run the Saudi payroll. Now, doesn't that change 9/11 completely?
Right, right. And you,
from what they,
you also
does that make you uncomfortable?
Yeah, I guess my thing would be because I guess there's two different things that you mentioned in the book too. Is that is it incompetency that allowed information that might have been able to prevent the attacks to slip through the cracks, or was it something a lot more sinister? And
let's look at the sinister for a moment. If indeed the Saudis financed the hijackers, you know who the arch enemy of the Saudis was, don't you? Saddam Hussein.
Right.
So is that the payback? We went and took Saddam out on behest of the Saudis? Because Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11.
Right.
And that's why I thought we went to war, didn't we?
Right. No,
didn't we go to war because of 9/11? Then why would we attack a country that had nothing to do with it?
But I guess my thing also is that, the whole thing of Iraq, I mean, it's commonly now looked at as a failure, and a big reason it's looked at as a failure is because they couldn't come up with weapons of mass destruction. Wouldn't it have been easy if the administration could do something, that dastardly to plant weapons of mass destruction and legitimize the whole war?
Maybe, maybe not. Maybe they just frankly didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
Maybe they were that arrogant. Why? It worked, didn't it? Worked on you. They didn't find no weapons of mass destruction, but we still... See, the bottom line is this. Here's what I want you to think about a moment.
Mm-hmm.
This is what destroyed the American dream for me from George Bush. I never believed, and I'm a veteran, I never believed that my country would line up our military at the border of another sovereign nation, invade that country, overthrow its government, and occupy them when they hadn't done anything.
Yeah.
That's what we did.
No, yeah, it's a big...
That's what we... And yet, we won't say we were wrong, will we? We won't apologize, will we? Because the United States doesn't do that anymore. I'll give you something to think about. Who do you call it? The big polling people, Gallup? A couple years ago, year and a half, 2 years ago, Gallup did a major poll with like 3,000 people internationally. It wasn't publicized much here in the U.S. because, of course, our media is not going to go into this. They did an international poll of I think it was 3,000 people, and one of the questions was, if you went to war, who do you think would likely be the opponent? 23% internationally said the United States. 8% said Pakistan, 6% said China. So literally 1 out of 4 people internationally thinks if there's a war, they'll be fighting the U.S. As a veteran, I hang my head in shame. That's what we're projecting throughout the world now, is that we are the ultimate people who will wage war on anybody.
Right.
I don't think that's what America should be. And I think that's why we're falling in world standing, is because nobody looks up to us anymore.
Yeah.
They now just simply fear us. And that's like Rome.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're following textbook Roman Empire.
Right. I agree, and it's definitely really interesting. There are a lot. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff.
Then if you agree, then you have to stand up and ask the questions about 9/11, because that's the catalyst that did it.
Right.
Follow me?
Gotcha.
There you go. You can't run from it.
Right.
You need to uncover it and understand it.
Mm-hmm. I did want to ask you some wrestling.
And that, wait, I'll get you with this one. You know how they say if there was a big conspiracy like that, someone would have talked?
Right.
Yeah, right? Well, first of all, it's first-degree murder. Who's going to talk about that? Second of all, go back to the Manhattan Project. Do you know what that was?
Mm-hmm.
Do you?
That was with the atomic bomb, right?
Yeah, it's where we created it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Over 150,000 people worked on that project, and yet nobody knew we had that bomb till it exploded in Japan.
Right.
So everything's compartmentalized. It only takes a handful of people to know the big picture, especially in government, to where it can still be pulled off, because so many people it's compartmentalized.
Right.
And people don't talk about things. They don't, how could they have kept that secret of the bomb when 150,000 people worked on it?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's fascinating stuff, and I definitely agree. It should, there should be more of that discussion out there. And now this is going to be a weird segue. But,
all right.
You were the voice of, I mentioned you were the voice of wrestling when I started watching, and I did want to ask you, did you enjoy, what did you enjoy more, wrestling or being behind the mic?
Both. Again, it's a political answer, but I enjoyed both because I concentrated and got focused equally on both. During my wrestling career, the height of it, I never even considered being behind the mic. So I was focused on being the best wrestler I could be. I only fell in behind the mic because I got injured and had blood clots in my lungs the night before I was supposed to wrestle Hogan for the title in L.A., and I was on the shelf for 6 months. I couldn't perform, and it was during that 6 month time that Vince approached me with an idea. Mm-hmm. And the idea was to put the first villain on the microphone. And Vince was correct. It got over unbelievable. And then it got to the point where I was both doing the matches, talking, and still wrestling when I came back. Mm-hmm. And I just made the conscious decision, well, you're making enough money just talking about it. Why get thrown around anymore? You've already been in the ring double-digit years. That's long enough for anybody. So I then made the transition to strictly being behind the mic, and I don't regret it a bit because I pretty much have my health today. A lot of people can't make that statement.
Right. And one thing I noticed, even as you know, being a heel announcer, is there were certain guys, like I feel like Randy Savage was one, where even when Randy Savage was a babyface, you could see the respect you had for him, you know, through your commentary. Even though you know, if you're playing a heel, but you could still tell like you had a great admiration for some guys.
I had respect for everybody that I broadcast. I mean, the only real controversial thing where Vince ever stopped me was Coco Beware. Mm-hmm. And I cleared it through Coco. I wanted to have fun. It was the 80s. Remember Coco had the parrot and
right.
Frankie. You know, and so I went on the air and I said that the B stood for buckwheat.
Right.
And that Coco was Buckwheat's grandson. Well, apparently the NAACP came down on Vince and Vince backed down. Yeah. And I was angry at him for that because I said, this is discrimination. I said, Saturday Night Live has Eddie Murphy playing buckwheat all the time. Mm. And I said, actually, the R Gang was the first integrated neighborhood on television.
Right.
Where whites and blacks lived together and played together. Mm-hmm. And I said, I went to Coco and told him what I was going to do. And Coco looked at me, and his exact reaction was, Bobby, he said, you do anything you want, because whenever you talk about me, I make more money.
Right.
So I had his blessing, and yet that was the one point Vince backed down, and he wouldn't let me do it anymore for fear the NAACP was going to call him on the carpet, which they did, right. But he wouldn't fight him. And it's the only time I've seen Vince back down.
Yeah, and you and Vince have a very interesting relationship, and you famously tried to get the wrestlers to unionize before WrestleMania 2. What was Vince McMahon's reaction when he found out? What was that meeting like?
He threatened to fire me, mm-hmm. But it didn't matter anyway because I had just quit because Vince wasn't going to let me do Predator.
Yeah.
And so I quit wrestling. I said, Vince, I got a chance to co-star with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you're going to tell me I can't? Yeah. I quit. So I went off and did Predator. And that's why that year they had to open up Saturday Night Main Event with Bobby Heenan. Mm-hmm. Because I'd quit. And that's what, and NBC came down on Vince then and said, we bought this show with Jesse Ventura, where the hell is he? Mm-hmm. And that's when Vince had to come back to me, and that's when I got my deal.
Yeah.
Because I had the cards in my favor. I'd already signed for The Running Man that fall. Right. So I was doing another major film that fall, and it gave me what I needed to fight Vince. And that's when I was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2004, I said my biggest accomplishment in wrestling was that I was the first wrestler that made Vince deal with an agent.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that didn't get over too well.
I'm sure.
But you know me.
Yeah.
And but I had the greatest job in the world because who has a job where you can insult your boss on national TV and it's okay?
Right. Yeah. No, that was.
You know that was, and I only worked one day every 3 weeks.
Yeah, and you guys had amazing chemistry too.
Yep.
And do you still think wrestlers should unionize, or do you think there have been enough
Absolutely.
changes to the business?
Are you kidding? Mm. How backward can it be?
Yeah.
And even when I fought with Vince, it wasn't over him. Mm-hmm. At that time, I had to pay my own health care for me and my family. It was costing me $5,000 a year. If we had a union, that could be diminished to maybe $2,000 a year because there's strength in numbers.
Right.
You could have retirement. I feel I took the gamble and sued Vince in '90 in federal court and beat him. He still sends me. I get quarterly checks. Because anything I appear on, he has to pay me for.
Now, does that apply to the network as well?
I don't know. I'm going to find out.
Yeah.
I'm glad you reminded me, because I'm going to call my attorney David Olson today on that.
Yeah.
On the net, I don't know if it does or not, but I'm not being paid for it, and I understand I'm appearing quite often on there.
Right. Now, before you did that lawsuit, wrestlers weren't getting merchandise or anything, right? They weren't getting a cut of really anything.
No, you got some stuff, but you got what Vince wanted to give you.
Okay.
Nothing was negotiated. Nothing was, the talent gets so much percent. Vince determined it all.
Right.
And then it's so ridiculous that they still call wrestlers independent contractors. Mm-hmm. So Vince doesn't have to pay Social Security either. Right. See how it works?
Yeah.
And then, and how are you an independent contractor when Vince tells you when you'll work, he tells you who you're working with, and he tells you whether you win or lose?
Yeah.
That's not an independent plus you can't go work for nobody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How is that an independent contractor?
Are you surprised that that's kind of stuck all this time?
Yeah, because he's lucky I didn't run for the Senate, because I threatened to do that a number of years ago. Had I won the Senate, I would have started an immediate senatorial investigation into why pro wrestlers are called self-employed.
Yeah.
When they're not.
Right. And when
they've been getting away with it, that saves Vince a ton of money.
Yeah.
And it puts it on the back. And see, that's why you need a union. Plus, the fact that there was a time I wrestled 63 consecutive nights in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with the union, you'd wrestle so many nights in a row, and then they'd be required to give you a couple of days off, wouldn't they?
Right.
See?
Oh,
but the way the business is set up, you're a slave. Mm-hmm. You're a slave to the money, because if you don't wrestle, you don't get paid.
Right.
At least in the old days. Then I helped bring in contracts, so maybe it's not that way now.
Right. And you had mentioned that you and that Hulk Hogan kind of outed you to Vince. How did you find that out? And were you pretty tight with Hogan before that? Was that where your issues with Hogan started?
Yep. And I found out about it at a federal sworn deposition of my court case.
Okay, so not until
under
1990.
Sworn federal deposition, where Vince put his hand on a Bible and swore to tell the truth. See, I had told my attorney in a deposition you can ask about anything. Mm-hmm. And I had told my attorney what had happened, how I stood up in the dressing room and tried to unionize right before WrestleMania 2, and how the next day I got a call from Vince reading me the Riot Act. And I thought, how would he know there was nobody in the room but the wrestlers? Mm-hmm. When I did it, I picked my time. And then during deposition, I had told my lawyer, I said, if you can find out from Vince how he learned about the unionizing, I'd sure like to know. And I was sitting right in the room. I can't say anything. And my attorney said, Mr. McMahon, he said, has there ever been a union in wrestling? And Vince responded, no. And my attorney said, has anyone ever tried to form one? And Vince sat a moment and said, yeah. He said, I always remember the quote. He said, I think Jesse Ventura might have spouted his mouth off about it one time. And my attorney said, well, how do you know that? Did you hear Mr. Ventura say that? Vince went, no. And my attorney said, then how did you know? And with no hesitancy, he went, Hulk Hogan told me.
Yeah.
And so right there under sworn deposition, I learned how Vince learned.
Right.
And then Hulk, of course, continued to deny it, even when Vince went on national TV and was confronted by Larry King, who said Jesse Ventura said that Hulk Hogan told you about trying to unionize. Vince said it on Larry King. Yes, he did.
Yeah.
And yet Hogan continues to deny it.
Have you ever talked to him about it?
Nope.
Yeah. And so,
why would I?
Right. So
I was so stunned that day. I didn't show no emotion, but I sat in the chair frozen.
Yeah.
When Vince said that, because I had always thought Hogan, in my day, it was the wrestlers against the promoters. You were considered an office stooge if you went squealing stuff to the promoter. So as far as I was, and Hogan came up when I did, so as far as I'm concerned, he's an office stooge.
Do you think that whole incident affected your time with WCW?
The whole incident with what? Hogan
With
and
Hogan.
WWF?
Yeah.
No, what happened to WCW was Bischoff brought Hogan in, and that spelled the end for me. Hogan wanted me gone.
Yeah.
And my contract had about 6 months to go on it when they brought in Hogan, and I was never called back.
Well,
for 6 months, I just sat at home and they paid me.
Why did he want you gone? I mean,
because Hogan wanted to control, and he knew he couldn't control Jesse Ventura. And he knows that I'll say anything on the mic.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know they were bringing him in, and I badmouthed him. They didn't tell me that Bischoff didn't tell me he was bringing him in.
Yikes.
And so right there, Bischoff's loyalty was to Hogan because he managed to finagle him when he left Vince, and that cut me loose, even though I helped Bischoff get to the position of power. Bischoff's a little backstabber.
I wanted to ask you, too, about medical marijuana, because that's a topic
Sure.
I see you tweeting about, and you talk on your website about it.
Yep.
With medical marijuana in sports, is that something, it seems like that would help a lot of the wrestlers' issues with pain kills and alcohol.
It could.
Or at least...
I believe that all marijuana should be legalized because it's a medical plant, and those that smoke it for the euphoric psychological feeling, that's mental health.
Right.
And it's the least dangerous. It's been around thousands of years. The great thing is poor people can have access to marijuana if it's legal because they can grow it then, and they don't have to pay necessarily pharmaceutical companies big money for pills. And it could help a lot of people. Marijuana is so versatile. You want to hear the best argument?
Yeah, sure.
Here's the best argument. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights and Betsy Ross's flag are all made out of it.
I did not know that.
Well, now you do.
Hemp?
Out of hemp, which is marijuana.
Yeah.
That's what you get for the medical marijuana. See, the medical won't even get you high. It's drops under the tongue. And it's ridiculous. See, the reason they don't want this plant is because it grows wild. And pharmaceutical companies, then they want to be able to make the money off your health problems.
Right. And I live in Colorado, and, with the election...
Oh, thank goodness for you. Kudos to Colorado for legalizing. You know the only thing that's strange about Colorado?
What's that?
You have to live there and have a prescription to get medical, but you can buy recreational right over the counter.
Is that true? I did not know that.
Yes, that's crazy.
That is the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
That's crazy. Yeah, an outsider cannot buy medical marijuana in Colorado. But weird. You can buy the euphoric smoking marijuana to get high. You can buy that, but you cannot get medical.
That makes no sense. Yeah, Colorado
makes no sense.
Colorado has some weird laws. Like you can't buy a car on a Sunday. You used to not be able to.
We have that in Minnesota too.
Yeah.
Those are called blue laws. That's because you allowed religion to come into government.
Yeah.
That's why you have blue laws. That's religion exercising its muscle into government, which it should not do.
Is that is that another? Do you think that's another issue? Is how much religion has gotten involved into politics and seeped into the political
Absolutely.
process?
I'm a huge believer in the separation of church and state. You go believe what you want on your own time. You go to church on your own time. But don't bring those beliefs into government and force us all to live by them.
Right.
Because you don't have that right. I'm an atheist. And I look at all religions as rather silly.
I'm kind of the same way.
And it doesn't, and they're all, it seems every war is religious based.
Right.
We're killing each other over religion. And to me, I'll give you this quote, I don't think mankind and religion can both survive.
Yeah. No.
Because all religion teaches is Armageddon.
Right.
Look at it. Every religion says Armageddon's going to happen at some point. So they're leading us to it by the beliefs that they have. So that they can what? When it happens, say, see, we were right?
Right.
You know, I firmly believe that man and religion cannot both survive eventually. One is going to have to disappear.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's something I'm still surprised at, the percentage of people with all the information that's out there, and the science and the evolving of our education, that so many people still believe that dinosaurs were 2,000 years ago.
It's guilt.
Yeah,
every parent is made to believe that if you don't, your child will suffer eternally.
Right.
It's all guilt driven.
Mm-hmm.
All of it. That's how I view it. Yeah. Although I will tell you this, I love the new Pope.
Yeah, he's
almost made me become a Catholic. No, I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but I love the new Pope. No. He's the best Pope they've ever had.
Right, he's definitely the most progressive by
he's the best. Right. He said that atheists can go to heaven.
Right, yeah, that was...
he's the best one there's ever been. Right. Gives me great relief to know I can be an atheist, and Pope says it's still okay, I can make it there.
Yeah, we've got a chance.
How you live your life.
Right.
If you live your life good, you don't have to worship some supreme being.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Just live by the golden rule, and the Pope says you can make it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to believe the Pope on that one.
There we go. And in the book, you're critical of the Bush administration a lot, and the Clinton administration. How do you think the Obama administration has done compared to those, or
I'm critical of them too.
Yeah.
Obama's been the worst on whistleblowers. He's worse than Bush.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that comes forward and tells the truth about government gets the wrath as bad as you can get.
Right.
He said he'd get us out of Gitmo. Are we out of Gitmo? No. He said he'd get us out of the Middle East. I think the guy just died in Iraq the other day, didn't he?
Right.
There you go. So we're not out of there. Notice there's no difference in foreign policy.
Right.
Whether you got a Democrat or Republican in there, the same thing happens, don't it?
Right.
There you go.
Well, I do think one is still a little more extreme with war. You know what I mean? Like the Republicans are seem more anxious to get to war.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
All the Democrats voted for it too.
That's true.
Hillary's now admitting that her worst vote in the Senate was the Iraq War.
Yeah.
Well, Hillary, why did you vote for it in the first place?
Right.
Because you held your finger up to the political win. That's why.
Yeah.
You got they convinced the public that somebody was going to pay for 9/11, and they chose Saddam Hussein, who had nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And we killed him.
Right.
Invaded the country, occupied it. And now today you have ISIS, all because of us.
Mm-hmm.
There wouldn't be ISIS if we hadn't did that. Notice they don't talk about that, do they?
Right. Well, yeah. I think you'll hear some people mention it, but...
Not on mainstream, you won't.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
You don't hear no apology from the United States going, gee, we kind of destabilized the whole area, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was done by design.
Yeah. And, now, was there a particular conspiracy in your book that you learned kind of the most on while researching it and writing it?
The one I knew nothing about was the attempted coup d'etat by Wall Street over Franklin Roosevelt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd never heard of that one.
They don't teach you that in our history books, do they?
No.
And the killing of Lincoln has ended pretty much at John Wilkes Booth, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, setting up the lone nut assassin, aren't they?
Right.
Even though, 8 people were tried and convicted, 6 sentenced to death, including the first woman?
Yeah.
And yet you're not taught that in school? Not a word about that Wall Street tried to pull a coup d'etat and make General Smedley Butler the president. Only thing is, Smedley was a true hero and blew the whistle on them in Congress.
Right.
Today, you don't even hardly have a record of it. They erased it.
Yeah. Where is where's the fine line, I guess, between national security and what the public should know?
Well, the fine line is there should definitely be a statute of limitations on it.
Mm-hmm.
Because how can something a decade ago still be affecting national security now? Okay, give you an example. National security. You can't get Lee Harvey Oswald's tax return.
Right.
Now, he's been dead how long? 50 years? More? And you can't get his tax return because of national security?
Why would you think
How
that
could Oswald's tax return affect national security?
Right. Yeah, that makes no sense.
Exactly. And 9/11. Why can't we see the report that it happened 14 years ago?
Right. Now I kind of wanted to just have a little fun and bring up a couple wrestling-related conspiracies and see your thoughts on it. The Montreal Screwjob. Do you think that was a work? Or
the what?
The Montreal Screwjob with Bret Hart and Vince McMahon?
I have no idea. I wasn't with the company at the time it happened. I wasn't privy to what went down, and I wouldn't offer a comment on it because I don't know.
Yeah.
You got to remember something. I'm not good for these because when I left wrestling, I left.
Yeah.
I didn't sit and hang on and watch every week and hope to come back and make a comeback. I moved on with my life. Right. When I left WCW, there was going to be no more wrestling in my future.
Yeah. And you kind of signed up back with Vince for the XFL. What was that experience like?
It was fun for a while until we lost our advertisers and it started to falter, and then working for Vince doing it was fun the first half of the season, and it was a nightmare the second half of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, just on my performing, because the attitudes changed. And all of a sudden, I was being told what to say in a headset every play.
Was that directly through Vince?
Yeah.
Jeez.
I finally looked at him and said, "Why don't you do it?" What's my purpose? To say what you want me to say?
Yeah. Was there?
So it ended badly.
Did anyone approach you about doing wrestling commentary again after WCW?
No.
Yeah.
Well, Vince never will. A lot of people have approached me. How come you're never at WrestleMania when all the old timers come back, right? Mm-hmm. You notice I'm never there.
Right.
Well, the reason is, see, if Vince uses it and makes money, then he has to pay me.
Right. Right.
So he's not going to bring me there and show me at a WrestleMania, and then if he even shows my likeness or anything about me, he then has to, that tape, I have to get a certain percentage from it.
So have they just updated their contracts so that other announcers can't receive royalties? Is that what happened?
I think so. I don't know for certain.
Yeah.
I didn't work for him, so I don't know. But I heard he put in a Jesse Ventura clause that they all have to give up their rights.
Yeah.
And they forsake them. Well, see, Vince could have won the case, but here was the problem. It turned out to be quantum merit. When you sit down and negotiate with someone, the law says you can expect to be told the truth during those negotiations. Well, Vince wasn't truthful because I would always ask, and then later my agent, Barry Bloom, we would always ask, what about videotape royalties? Because I got paid for them in Hollywood. Vince kept saying, I don't pay royalties. Well, had that been true, he'd have won.
Okay.
No one requires him to pay them. But here's where I beat him. During Discovery, we found out that Hogan, Cyndi Lauper, Mr. T, and a few other people were collecting royalties.
Okay.
So it was certain people were getting them, and then they would lie to everybody else.
Yeah.
And I remember being on the stand, and my attorney saying to me, Mr. Ventura, had you known, and he went down the list of people who were getting royalties, would you have agreed to work without getting royalties? And I said, no, I would not have. If I knew they were getting them, I would want them too.
Right.
And that's what won the case, the fact that Vince lied. And Mr. T and Hogan, Cyndi Lauper, I can't remember other people, were all getting paid videotape royalties. Why? The majority of them came from mainstream, where you do get paid for it. And in order for Vince to get Mr. T, he had to give in to that.
Yeah.
Well, that cost him against me then.
Right. So in hindsight, could have then other guys like Bobby Heenan and those guys, before the contracts were changed, could have went back and sued as well, right? Or had the statute of limitations run up?
I don't know if they could have. I'm not sure if they could have, because I never signed a contract with Vince.
Okay.
They all did.
Oh, it was just like a handshake deal?
Yeah.
Wow.
I never signed nothing. I owned the copyright to Jesse the Body Ventura before I ever worked for Vince.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came to work for him, I had the copyright, the government copyright to my likeness.
Yeah.
And I never I never drug tested. They came up to me one time and they said, "Jesse, you got a drug test. Piss in a cup." I looked at the guy and said, "Jesse, don't do that." I said, "I'm innocent till proven guilty.
Yeah.
You have no probable cause. I don't piss in cups." And he said, "Everyone has to." And I said, "Fine, you go to Vince and you tell Vince Jesse's refusing." Never heard a thing more about it.
Yeah.
And I never urinated into a cup. I never was drug tested, because they have no right to do that without collectively bargaining it with me.
Mm-hmm.
If they want me to submit to drug tests, then you have to bring it up when I do a deal.
Yeah.
You don't come in after the deal's happening and tell me I have to submit to you invading my body without probable cause.
Right.
If I'm not showing up on time and I'm doing a horrible job because I'm drunk, stoned, or something else, then you have probable cause. But I don't think anyone could say Jesse Ventura never performed at his top ability.
Right.
So where's your probable cause?
Right.
No, I never, and I got Bruno going on that.
Yeah.
Oh, God, was that fun. The next day after the drug test, we're waiting to go to the next TV, and me and Bruno. And I looked at Bruno outside the hotel. I said, "Bruno, did you take a drug test yesterday?" Bruno looks at me and says, "Of course I did. Everyone had to." I said, "Bruno, you got to be kidding me." I didn't. I said, "You got to be kidding me. The great Bruno Sammartino, and they're going to make you submit to peeing in a cup to prove you don't do drugs?"
Right.
Oh, God, Bruno was so angry, I don't think he ever did one again. Because once it set in, Bruno, it took a while to get through to Bruno.
Mm-hmm.
But once you did, Bruno understood.
Yeah.
And I told him, "Bruno, they have no right. Look at who you are.
Mm-hmm.
You're Bruno Sammartino. Why are you peeing in a cup?"
And he was in his 50s then, too, right?
Oh, Bruno been around forever.
Yeah. Man.
And I got Bruno. Bruno's hopping mad. Especially when he found out I didn't do it.
Yeah, wow.
I said, "I didn't do it." I said, "I ain't going to do it. They have no right to, unless they collectively bargain it.
Yeah.
They have no right to ask you to submit to any type of testing of your body."
Right. And I wanted to ask you about Brock Lesnar, too, because one time you accompanied him to the ring for a dark match, right?
Yeah.
Is he someone you've kept in touch with?
We have the same lawyer. I introduced Brock to my attorney.
Oh, okay.
And my attorney still handles Brock, and Brock has the sweetest deal in wrestling right now.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Yeah. It helps to have Jesse's attorneys.
Right.
Nah, Brock put himself in a great position. He put himself in the position that I told Vince one day. I looked at Vince when we were taping one day, and I said, "Vince, the key to this business is to go get famous at something else and then come back, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Vince looked at me and smiled and said, "Now you're learning."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's when I went off to Hollywood, did those films, and came back.
Yeah.
I got I used to have my own name on my own dressing room door. I did.
Yeah.
Nobody else. That's why there was a lot of jealousy.
Right.
The greatest compliment I was ever paid was by Freddie Blassie. Freddie Blassie one day told all the wrestlers, "There's only one guy here who calls his own shots with Vince. That's Jesse Ventura." No, I had my own dressing room with my name on it.
Yeah.
Not that I wanted it. Vince just did it.
Right. I know. And you've had some legendary roles, and you've appeared on in a lot of movies. You've been starred with Schwarzenegger and Stallone. Do you have a personal favorite?
Of what?
The movie
Predator.
You've been in Predator.
Yeah, because that one I was doing really myself.
Yeah.
That was something I did 20 years earlier.
Yeah, and the I
I didn't fight an alien, but I knew how to be a special forces. I did 6 years in the SEALs.
Mm-hmm. Did you?
So I was highly trained
right.
to do that film.
Yeah, and your line, "I ain't got time to bleed." That's still quoted today.
Well, if Arnold hadn't gotten sick, it would have never happened.
Well, what happened?
Arnold got sick on the set. He couldn't work that day, and it was towards the end they started cutting stuff that had been cut. And Arnold got sick, so they had to resurrect the scene, and we went and did it. And McTiernan burst out laughing at the end of it, so I knew it would get in the film.
Wow.
But originally it had been cut. When they get towards the end of filming, a lot of great stuff gets cut because time is money, and they don't have the time to do it.
Yeah. Do you follow wrestling at all now?
Nope.
Yeah. What were your thoughts when Roddy Piper passed away? Because you guys had worked a lot together.
It hurt because I will tell you this: I was always a loner. Mm-hmm. I didn't hang with anybody, even when I was in the business. The only guy I really hung with was Big John Studd. Mm-hmm. We used to think alike. We both had families, and we'd ride together. Mm-hmm. John had always rented a big Lincoln, had plenty of room in it to fit him and me. But Roddy was probably the guy I was closest to after getting out. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't necessarily by design. We worked in the same business. I'd run into him now and then. Mm-hmm. We did the pilot together, of course, tag team.
Right.
And then later on, I remember I was doing the Tonight Show, and Roddy happened to show up at NBC, or was at NBC, so we sat around and laughed. And then when he had his podcast, I did his, and then he came on Off the Grid with me. Mm-hmm. And so it hit me hard because, first of all, he's younger than I am. Mm-hmm. And second of all, he was really the only guy now, in hindsight, after leaving the business, that I really had any relationship or contact with. And Roddy and I were the opposite. He looked at me one day and he said, "Don't you miss not being in the road and wrestling?" And I looked at him and said, "Not a bit." And Roddy looked at me and goes, "God, I do." Yeah. So Roddy and I were opposites on that. Roddy was made for wrestling. Mm-hmm. He loved it. Jesse Ventura, I think, was made to wrestle for a while, but was destined to do other things.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the big difference between. But when Roddy passed, it hit me personally because he was the guy who I was using basically to keep my little toe still attached to that business.
Right.
Roddy was like my go-between. He was my contact as friends who we'd sit and laugh and talk and reminisce with.
Yeah.
Because I still love to talk about. I was with Roddy when he and I forget who else was with us, we ate real Kentucky Fried Chicken. No, Vince had us on the road. We were some godforsaken place in Kentucky, and we needed to eat. And we all got so excited because we thought, oh, my God, this is where real Kentucky Fried Chicken is. So we went into Kentucky Fried Chicken, got our orders, and looked at each other after a few bites and said, it don't taste no different than New Jersey Kentucky Fried Chicken. But I'll always remember that. Roddy and I ate real Kentucky Fried Chicken in Kentucky.
Yeah. That's great. The one thing, like with you...
It's funny how simple things like that you remember more than the big things.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's sad, and when after Piper passed away, I went back and watched a lot of his old stuff and a lot of the stuff you guys did together. And I know you don't really follow the business today, but it's just you guys were so different back then. Like yourself, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper. You guys weren't like normal guys that you'd never see someone and go, that guy.
Do you want to know why we were different? I can tell you. I think.
Sure.
Here's why. Because Vince is a power madman. Mm-hmm. Control freak. Mm-hmm. Back in our day, he didn't control our interviews to the extent we had the creative control to say what we wanted to say and how we did it. Today, they're all puppets.
Yeah.
They all have there were no writers. I'll never forget the first time we did NBC Saturday Night Main Event. We're on NBC, Vince and I, this is the big breakthrough. Wrestling is going to be prime time, NBC Saturday Night Main Event, Dick Ebersol, NBC Sports, right? That afternoon, we're sitting at the table, and they come up to me with this big binding notebook, and they flop it in front of me, and I open it up. Vince says this, Jesse says this, Vince says this, Jesse says this. I looked at Dick Ebersol, and I said, Dick, what the hell is this? He said, that's your script. I looked at Dick Ebersol, I said, Dick, and here's my exact quote. I said, 6 months ago, you people didn't give a rat's ass about wrestling.
Yeah.
I said, I've been in the business now for 12 years. I said, you have no writer who can write for me. You have no writer that has the experience I have. And I will not accept a writer writing what I'm going to say. Ebersol was so good, he sat there a moment, listened to me, and he smiled, said, you're right. Throw that book away. I said, thank you, Dick.
Yeah.
And we went on from there. Ebersol was, he got it. That there weren't writers who could write for Jesse the Body. How are they going to do that?
Absolutely.
Only I can be Jesse the Body. You know, and today's wrestling is all so scripted, written, staffs of writers, memorization. There's no improv.
Right.
That's what's missing.
Yeah, there's no...
in Roddy in my day, if he was doing Piper's Pit, or if I was doing the Body Shopper on the mic, yes, we'd get the general idea of what the angle was, but it was up to us to sell it.
Right.
And our creativity. They've stripped these people of their own creativity. They're down to a small amount of minds rather than using the talent itself.
Right.
And that to me, from a layman or an insider or Jesse Ventura's point of view, is the difference between what you're talking about and our day.
Absolutely.
In wrestling, today and yesterday.
Yeah, it's night and day. And I did want to ask you about your show, Off the Grid.
Sure.
Because I know you got to be going. But how can fans catch it? And what's...
It's right on the internet. All you got to do is go to ora.tv, ORA.tv, Off the Grid, Jesse Ventura, like anything on the internet. It'll bring you right to it. I'm on every day, or you can pull them up. That's what's great about the internet. You don't have to see them when they come on initially. You can watch them at your convenience. I'll put it to you this way. You're wrestling fans, right?
Absolutely.
Mostly your audience?
Yeah.
Imagine, if you will, I have now at my disposal total control, nobody telling me nothing about what I got to say, and I get to do a 10 to 11-minute interview on it.
Yeah.
That's what you get on Off the Grid. Jesse the Body Ventura doing 11 minutes on a particular political position, or something other than wrestling, or sometimes it may even be wrestling if it would ever rear its head.
Yeah.
But that's the freedom I have, and that's why I love doing the show. It's given. I feel that when I got the show, and of course there's no FCC on the internet, I felt like Dr. Martin Luther King, great God Almighty, free at last.
Yeah.
There was no Vince to tell me what to say. There was no FCC regulations. I can call BS by the long name.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and that's why I love the internet. It's a perfect medium for me, and I don't anticipate leaving it for a while.
Yeah, well, I urge everyone to check that out, and also get Americans Conspiracies. It's on newsstands now. It's a fascinating read. And Jesse, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
And I'll tell you what, all wrestling fans, email McMahon and tell him we want Jesse at WrestleMania. Pay him.
Absolutely.
That'll get you some good heat with the WWE.
There you go.
Just hit him with a barrage. How come Jesse's never at WrestleMania?
Absolutely. We'll make sure to mention that. And
all right.
And thank you, Jesse. And take
care. You take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.